Hello again, welcome back to Lard Island, home of Two Fat Lardies. Further to the last video, where Richard looked at deployment points, it's now time we looked at some of the real meat and potato issues of sharp practice, movement and firing. What we've attempted to do with both of these areas is to create rules that are very simple indeed, to the point in fact where they become intuitive after just a few turns of play. Let's take a look at how they work. Got that bit. The first thing we need to know about sharp practice is that there's no prescribed sequence within the turn. When you activate a unit, it has two actions which you can use as it likes. It actually has a choice of three basic things: to move, to fire, or to undertake a task. Moving is really simple. If you want to move with one action, you roll 1d6 and that's how far you move in inches. If you want to move with both actions, you simply roll 2d6. That's it. You've just learnt the basics of infantry movement. It's all you need. Of course, there are some variants on this given the period. Mounted movement varies slightly. They can move at the walk, at the canter or the gallop, with some variation on the dice accordingly. Skirmish troops always get one additional action of movement, allowing them to advance or retreat while still firing, but the system really is that simple. Of course, with your two actions, you may decide that you only want to use them for movement and one for firing. This is a skirmish system, so the order in which you can do things is completely flexible. If you want to move and then fire, that's fine, you can do that. If you want to fire and then move, that's equally acceptable. But what about firing? How do we do that? Firing takes just one action. Again, the rules for this are really simple. You simply roll 1d6 for each man firing. If your target is at close range, you need to roll a 4, a 5 or a 6 to get a hit. If the target is at effective range, you need a 5 and a 6, whereas at long range, you're going to need a 6 to hit. Straightforward. These figures are very consistent. Whatever cover the target is in, it makes it very easy to remember. We then roll a d6 for each hit that you get, and this is where the cover starts to take effect. If the target is in the open, on a roll of 3, 4 or 5, it means that the target takes a point of shock. On a 6, it means that you've killed someone. If you're in light cover, a 4 or 5 is a point of shock, and a 6 is a kill. In hard cover, a 5 is a point of shock, and it's a 6 again that kills. Again, these never change, very easy to remember, makes it very natural and easy to learn and store away so that you can just pull it up when you need to in that game. So, you're possibly wondering what shock is. Kills are fairly obvious, and to be honest, when you're facing a bunch of smoothbore muskets, getting killed is just a matter of bad luck. What wins the game is the building up of the levels of shock on your opponent, as this represents negative cohesion and the erosion of his ability to keep fighting. Essentially, every point of shock is a negative morale point, which brings your opponent one step closer to packing in and going home. We're going to cover shock in more detail in a subsequent video when we run through a game, but for now, just be aware that it's a match winner. It's how you defeat your enemy. You don't need to kill all of your enemy to beat them, just persuade them that fighting you is a bad idea. Just like in real life. Okay, so we know that firing takes one action, and for troops with breech loading weapons, they can fire once for each action. However, this is the black powder period, and some weapons take longer to load. How does that work? The simplest and most prevalent weapon of the period is the old faithful smoothbore musket. Quite simply, this fires with one action and loads with another. So men with a smoothbore musket can fire once a turn if they're stationary. Nice and easy. This is also true of rifled muzzle loaders, with the introduction of the mini cartridge. A slower weapon is the early rifle, which needs two actions to load. So typically, a man with a rifle will fire twice in 3 turns. To keep track of this, we place a clump of smoke in front of a musket when it ends the turn unloaded. But we place 2 clumps of smoke in front of a rifle-armed man. As we use actions to reload, they remove 1 clump of smoke. Again, this is nice and simple and doesn't need much remembering. Talking of which, rifles and skirmish troops are worth a specific mention as they can do some really clever stuff. We mentioned earlier that troops whose job it is to skirmish can get an additional action of movement. They also shoot slightly better, getting a +1 to hit. Actually, there are 3 types of skirmish troops. Light infantry, who are top draw professionals, and they get a +1 in all situations. Then we have skirmishers, who are not quite so well trained, but who get the +1 as long as the enemy hasn't got to within close range. And finally, we have the irregular skirmishers. They're certainly not professionals, but they still have an aptitude for irregular fighting. They get the skirmish bonus when they're operating from cover, so maybe they're in woods, behind a fence, or a similar position. In a nutshell, that is how shooting works. Again, it's all very simple, all very straightforward and intuitive. However, it is worth saying that this is troops operating in a normal manner. In the next video, we'll be looking at how the player can use his influence to try and get them to up their game so they can really outperform the enemy. So we hope to see you then. For now, thanks very much for watching.